Blog Talk Radio.
We're gonna have a TV party tonight. Alright! We're gonna have a TV party, alright! Tonight! We got nothing better to do than watch TV and have a couple of brews. Everybody's gonna hang out here tonight. Alright! We'll pass out on the couch. Alright! Tonight! We got nothing better to do.
Greetings and salutations, world. This is TV Party Tonight, and I am your host, the mandated reporter, your pal Wheezy, and boy am I mortified, Mr. Mark Rattledge. You'll have to excuse me if I don't have my usual exuberance tonight. I'm a little under the weather, but that's all right. We're going to muddle through this. We were supposed to do this last night, but we had some conflicting schedules, so tonight we gather around the old TV to discuss the first ever Fox Marvel television collaboration, Legion. They decided let's go find one of the more obscure mutants in the Marvel canon, and we'll do a whole TV show based around them. And we got 8 episodes, 8 freaky deakies, schizo episodes called Legion. No, I am not alone tonight. I am joined by the comic book gang. They don't carry knives, they don't carry guns. They carry comic books, and they hit you over the head with them. Ladies and gentlemen, the host of source material in his own right, the leader of our gang, the disapproving father, Mr. Jesse Starcher. How do you do, sir?
Well, technically, Legion was a mutant, but that's the comic book gang. That's how you get into the comic book gang right there. You got to talk like that.
You guys, I can't work like this.
you neckbeard, you.
All right, man. Glad to be here.
I'm glad. Joining us also tonight, a host of his own podcast that we syndicate here on the Rattledge Broadcasting Network, the Screaming Boy himself, Ronnie Adams. How do you do, sir?
How's it going, Mark? I am happy to be here and a part of the show.
Why are you doing like crazy? Why are you doing crazy fake radio voice? Just fucking talk normal.
I don't know, but at the top of the hour.
Oh God. All right, and lastly, here's a man who knows his trains and planes, and his automobiles, and he counts them. Ladies and gentlemen, Josh Calandros keeps the trains running on time. That's his job. Ladies and gentlemen, Josh Calandros, how do you do, sir?
Doing well. How are you?
That's me trying to figure out what.
Slight Mussolini reference.
You're welcome. That was me pulling an intro out of my ass. I didn't know what else to say. All right. Never say I don't know how to vamp. All right. Let's get into this. If you're listening to this live, the WWE is also doing their Hall of Fame tonight. So we're going to give you 90 minutes of TV talk goodness, mutants galore, and then I'm getting off this fucking thing so I can go finish watching the Hall of Fame. God damn it. I am missing right now Jim Cornette inducting the Rock and Roll Express. So let's get to Legion,
How is
everybody.
Cornette still alive?
He runs mostly on hate. You know, it's just he doesn't have blood in his veins anymore. It's just mostly hate at this point. It's the pink goo.
He's got to be
from Ghostbusters.
He's got to
2.
be just skeletal at this point. He's got to be like scary old looking, you know, like Tom Petty looking. Just when will his body ultimately collapse?
Turn to dust.
We're gonna see him with Jim Ross. We're gonna see him with Jim Ross on Sunday before WrestleMania. So I'll let you know if he's mostly skeletal at this point, or as I've said, he's surviving mostly on hate. All right, enough wrestling talk. Let's talk Legion. Let me go to you first, Josh. How much do you know about Legion? Answer the question we all have on our minds. Who the fuck is this guy?
Yeah, so I would say that for me personally, I wouldn't say I know the character intimately, but I think I might know the character a little bit more than your average comic book reader. So Legion is the mutant code name. Everybody gets a fun, cool code name for David Haller. I won't go too much into depth because I'll leave that up to the narrative that we go with today. But he's got crazy. He's kind of an Omega level mutant, I think, is kind of the delineator that Marvel Comics gives these particular characters with like unfathomable level powers. You know, Magneto's cool, he's awesome, he's really powerful, he controls anything magnetic, but that's kind of child's play for people on David's level.
Okay. Ronnie, do you know much of anything about Legion?
Yeah, I mean, it was on and off. I knew a little bit about Legion, just through X-Men comic books and him being mentioned, and always. It was funny because he has a multiple personality disorder, and in the Bible, it's a biblical reference to a man who was possessed by demons, not demons. And they asked him what the name. You know, they said, "What is your name?" He said, "We are Legion, for we are many." So same thing with him. He has many personalities. So that kind of intrigued me in him, and so I watched him. So I read some things with him. Am I mistaken in saying that he was mostly housed on Muir Island with Moira McTaggart?
That is correct.
I think I was gonna say I think you're right.
Because every time I read it, he was that was referenced, and then he was introduced into the Ultimate line of comics, Ultimate X-Men, where he was what he is in the comics, only on meth, and he was like an Omega level mutant who wanted to destroy everything.
Okay. Switching tracks for a second, Jesse, when you found out that Fox and Marvel were, specifically Fox, saw what was happening with ABC and Marvel and went, "We want the money," and decided, well, we're going to do that too. We're going to start just pulling as much mutant content out of Marvel and throw it on our TV as much as we can. And they came up with this Legion concept. Were you excited about it? Were you nonplussed? What was your thoughts about a potential Fox Marvel television show?
I can say that I was probably more along the lines of very wary. I didn't know how they would make this a good show based upon from what I knew of the guy. Just like what these guys were saying, he was an Omega level mutant. I mean, he could do just about anything. So I was kind of curious as to how they were going to portray this guy. Number one, was he just going to be balls out powerful and nobody's going to be able to mess with him, and we're going to have all sorts of references to the Marvel Universe? Is that what we're going to have here? I certainly wasn't expecting what we got. So what other Fox shows, comic book shows, are there? Not just Marvel, but I know there's Gotham. Is there any other ones?
That would be DC.
I know, but is there any other comic book shows? Any other comic book, comic-related shows on Fox?
On Fox specifically?
Oh, okay. I understood what you were asking me. Shoot, not really. I mean, yeah, Gotham is the one that they basically, if you forget that if you ignore the fact that this is supposed to be about Batman, it's actually not a bad show.
Okay.
But outside of that, no, I think this is the first time Fox was really collaborating with Marvel, and they've got some other stuff coming out in the future. But this, what I believe, was the first time they've collaborated to create something wholly new. I'll tell you what my thought was, and then we'll get into the actual series. I was excited at the prospect of more Marvel content on TV. Like Jesse, though, I was a little wary about how they were going to do it because, with Marvel, there was a carefully laid out plan as far as the movies go, and while they were kind of what has been said about the movies and TV shows in the on the Disney Marvel side of things was kind of a separation of church and state. The movies were their thing, the TVs were their thing, and yes, they existed in their own universe, but the twains were not meeting as such. It was the same thing with the Netflix shows. The Netflix shows kind of had their own thing, the ABC stuff had their own thing, and then the movies were their own thing, and they could allude to one another here or there, but they mostly stayed out of each other's turf. But at the very least, there was a continuity on the Disney Marvel side of things, where as long as you stayed in your lane, stayed in your boundaries, you were okay. The problem with the Fox Marvel side of things is, and I yeah, you know where I'm going with this now, is just how fucked their continuity really is.
Yeah.
You know, with Days of Future Past, I'm not entirely sure how much they erased.
Everything.
I mean, conceivably,
I think the first three movies are just done. Yeah.
Yeah, that was my thought. The first three movies are gone.
Which is fine by me.
Basically.
I mean, if that's the price we have to pay to get rid of the third one, I'll give up the first two. That was how bad the third one was.
Willingness to make the sacrifice, huh? It is my understanding, and I don't want to go off too much on a tangent here, but it is my understanding that as of Days of Future Past, the continuity is basically First Class, Days of Future Past, Apocalypse, and Logan. That's it. That's the continuity. Everything else is gone, I tell you.
So I mean, you look at the movies that they've. I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to. But you look at the movies that are tackling with the X-Men. You know, the X-Men, even in the comic books, don't have the best track record of staying kind of within continuity or not confusing the heck out of everybody. So they tackle that. I mean, they did it pretty good up until The Last Stand, and The Last Stand just awful.
Let's not refight that argument.
Yeah. But I mean, then you've got Fox's track record. When I saw Legion, I was like, oh wow, that's the same as, you know, the X-Men or the Marvel character, and I was like, that is the Marvel character when I first saw it was coming on TV. And then, you know, it's Fox, and then I thought about Fantastic Four and Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer, and then the Fantastic Four 2015 movie, which makes me weep to this day.
Man.
And that's the only, like, I try to find something positive out of every movie I've ever watched. And when we went over that on Screaming Boy, that's the only movie that I completely trashed ever. I mean, it was just...
It was so bad.
Start to finish completely...
I'm like you. I usually can find something... I mean, if you ever listen to Damn You Hollywood, I can find something positive just about everything. And I couldn't... I couldn't think of a good thing to say about Fan Four Stick.
Well, you're paying $20 plus to go to a movie anymore. You know, by the time if you get some frickin' Raisinettes or whatever you want. Excuse me. So you might as well find something positive out of every one of them. There was not one positive thing in that movie. So their track, I mean, they did the original Daredevil. They did from 2003. They did Elektra. So they don't have the best track record when it comes to Marvel properties. So, but when you look at what they did with Days of Future Past and First Class and Logan, and Deadpool, they're kind of making up for it a little bit there.
Yeah.
I'm gonna actually go out and play devil's advocate here. That whenever I heard that they were going to do a Legion show, I was initially frustrated that it was going to be on Fox, simply because I feel like that property would do really well on like kind of an HBO Showtime, not because of the violence or R-rated nature of it or anything, just because of the quality of the production that those channels tend to put out. And
yeah,
I was pretty leery of it for quite a while until the first trailer came out. But when the first trailer, a video of anything remotely promotional for the show came out, I was like, this has a lot of potential, because I had read the first 3 issues of X-Men Legacy, which is it's a David Haller book. I don't know why they call it X-Men. I mean, I know why they did it. They did it to boost sales, but it's a David Haller book, and like just the first 3 issues of that, I've not really been able to go back and find individual issues anywhere, but to kind of complete the run. But it's an amazing start to a potential story concept with that character. And I thought if they go down the route that X-Men Legacy went, which they didn't, which I'm sure we'll get into later on, but it had a lot of potential, and I was actually really hopeful because, like we said, it's not a primary property really. It's an X-Men character, but it's not going to have all the pressure that an X-Men has, that a Fantastic Four had. Fantastic Four is the first superhero team that Marvel had.
Right.
So there's a lot of pressure on these properties. And each one of them has faltered in the movies in the past because some of them, or most of them, have all felt like 7 or 8 different movies poorly edited together. And that I feel that comes directly from the amount of pressure that gets put on them. Like they put so much pressure on these high-level properties, and this is not a high-level property. Like I feel like if they would have we're going to get the right people to create, write, whatever, that they're going to mostly be given free reign with this, and it's going to have less pressure, and I feel that's kind of how it turned out.
All right. Well, I went into the series cold myself. I read up a little bit on who Legion was and everything else, but I said, as I've said before, with television and movies, the people who put these things together really want to put their own stink on it, they want to take it their own way. They don't want to do just straight adaptation. So I kind of just said, okay, we know it's happening in the X-Men universe, such as it is, movie universe, but they're not gonna really touch the movies as such. It's got to exist and succeed on its own before they start dabbling in these other areas. So let's just see what they got for us. And so independently from comic book aside, movies aside, I was interested in this when I started to read up on it because of the attachment to the mental health milieu. You have a character who not only has Omega level telepathic and telekinetic powers, but he's also presumably schizophrenic, delusional, confused thoughts, that sort of thing. So I was interested in that because when you don't have control of your own mind, but you are able to control the minds of others and do that sort of thing, what does that do? So I thought there was a lot of potential here for a really interesting story. So let's get into the first episode here. We have our introduction to David, played by Dan Stevens, currently the Beast in Beauty and the Beast, ladies and gentlemen. Guy's got a hell of a career so far.
Really?
Wow.
I didn't know that. Weird.
Yeah. He's in the mental health institution with Aubrey Plaza, the hot Aubrey Plaza, who is classy as fuck. Classy as fuck. You guys ever see what is it? Mike and Dave Need Wedding Dates? No. Is the name of the movie? Oh yeah, it's worth it.
I didn't mean it like that. No, Mark.
My wife and I watched it at home. So we weren't going to pay money for that sort of thing. But, we like stupid comedies, and we thought that one looked stupid enough. And, big fan of Aubrey Plaza now. In any case, so you have Mr. Haller, and you have the Aubrey Plaza character, Lenny. They're in the institution, and in walks Sid. And just over the course of an hour, you're slowly but surely introduced to these characters and what their deal is. And I believe it's the first episode where he ends up going to, what is it, Division something? Division 3? What's the name of the division?
It's 1 or 3.
One or 3.
Sure it's
okay.
3.
It's not 2.
There's a division involved.
I know Division 3 is. I know Division 3 is the. They're the main baddies, aren't they?
Yeah.
No.
All right.
Yes.
Yes.
Maybe.
All right. So I have the wiki. I have the wiki up. Thank God.
Wiki.
There we go. So yeah, so eventually he ends up being interrogated. Actually, I've got to stand corrected here. The first episode is told through flashback while he's being interrogated. So we keep flipping between the actual interrogation and his time at Clockworks, which is the name of the psychiatric hospital. We have a situation where him and Sid end up becoming boyfriend and girlfriend. We learn that Sid is also a mutant who, when she touches you, she switches brains with you, that sort of thing. And this leads to her being released. She and David end up switching bodies for a little while. This leads later on to a daring rescue and escape where the good folks, led by Melanie Bird, raid Division 3 and rescue David from the clutches of his interrogators while blowing lots of people up in the process.
Oh, yeah.
So let me stop there with that horrible, horrible plot synopsis. And we'll just kind of go around the horn here. Josh, what did you think of the first episode here? Kind of a slow episode, but I think it needed to be. I think they needed to sort of set the tone for what this is. And I want to throw this caveat out there for you all to respond to. One of the things I said right off the bat was we were going to have an unreliable narrator. You're going to have this person who you don't quite know if his perspective is skewed or not, so you really never know what it is you're watching. And I think it was one of you guys who actually said in one of our chats, like, we're going to find out that Sid's not really real or some shit like that. And that was all altogether possible because of the way that they wrote this story. So throughout the first episode, you don't know if the story that David is telling is real or not, because you don't know if his perspective is skewed or if this is all in his mind or what. Mm-hmm. So, what did you think, Josh?
Yeah, and again, I had a few issues of that X-Men Legacy that I was read, and I was kind of hoping for, and I went into this thinking that at the end of the first episode, I wasn't convinced that anything was actually happening. But like you said, I feel like the first couple 3 episodes are relatively slower compared to the rest of the series. But I don't even think that it really felt like it was slow or not developing very well, just because of the way it was shot and the way it was edited, and just almost the fact that you felt like you're watching art, whether you really understood it all 110% or not. I mean, it's really rare that I feel like you see more movies where you're like really impressed with the cinematography or some sort of artistic aspect of it, aside from, man, that was just a really good movie. But I feel like you don't really get that experience watching TV shows very often at all. And I feel like this show had that more than anything I've ever watched on TV before. Just the different ways they edited it, the way it was like a non-linear from the beginning, but you didn't really know it at the time. But all of the different forced and implied psychedelic visual and audio type aspects to it. It was just it was an intriguing enough first episode to where I definitely wanted to watch the second one, but I wanted to watch the second episode more just to see how it was going to look and sound and feel.
Mm-hmm.
Ronnie?
I'm on the same tone as Josh. You don't, I guess you could say with network television shows, you don't get that ooh ah moment like that you do in movies. I mean, you kind of do in like the Netflix series. I hate to keep referencing back to those because obviously that's we're going to kind of compare those. Anybody watches it, you compare that to Daredevil, Luke Cage, and all that. You kind of I had those ooh ah just about every hallway fight, because there's always a hallway fight.
There's several hallways in Legion as well.
Well, yeah, that's true. What is it about hallways? But you get that artistic feel to it, and so it is it was impressive, I guess you could say.
Jesse, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, as for my impression of the first episode, I can remember sitting down going, okay, what am I in for? And the visuals were something I was not used to. And just like Ronnie had said, comparing it to something that was as straightforward as a Netflix show was usually. I mean, you can usually follow that. There's usually a linear thing that you can follow, a linear storyline that you can follow, and you know what's possibly going to happen next. You were left with so many questions. I mean, probably right off the bat, you don't know what to trust. So it was an experience to where I was like, okay, I'm ready for the second episode. I'm trying to think of one of my favorite. What I was really waiting for in that first episode was for David to unleash. I couldn't wait. I was like, he's gonna do it. And then you just kind of got, every once in a while, like the pen would shake, or like something would start shaking, or some kind of something or other would go off the chart, and you're like, oh, here we go, shit's gonna hit the fan. And then it kind of fade back. And you talk about like jumping all over the place. Like, okay, 1 minute he's here, 1 minute he's there, and that really does help, or does feed to the fact that your narrator he's not all there, and you don't know what's what. So sitting there and watching that first episode, I was excited to see something. This is something I've never seen in television before. The way that this was presented. And I was excited to be like, oh, this is something I could really dig. I don't watch a whole lot of TV, though, so I don't know what else is out there that's similar to this. But I can tell you I've not seen anything.
Two things, and then we'll move on to chapter 2. I was glad the way they ended it, because it's a sort of a long build-up, and I was thinking to myself, like, what kind of show is this going to be? Is this going to be just a lot of, artsy visuals and not a lot of action? Is there going to be a balance? And I was a little wary about, because, when they spent 90% of the show with weird visuals, and I'll tell you, I'm not like a Dark Highway kind of a person. I don't like the existential type television shows. Oh God, what's the one that everyone, Twin Peaks, that sort of thing.
Yeah,
I'm just not into it. It's not my thing. And I'm like, oh, this is gonna go the Twin Peaks route, and I'm not gonna dig it, but I'm gonna give this a shot because why not? Comic books. But they did a very crowd pleasing thing at the end of the episode with the escape. And you have the one mutant there just throwing people left and right with telekinesis. Which brings me to my last point on this. You have Tonamy Wallace and Kerry Loudermilk, who are helping him escape. And I don't know if you guys have figured this out, but these look like wholly made up characters. Like, I don't think any of the characters outside of the Shadow King, who we'll talk about later, obviously David, the allusion to Professor X. Other than those three characters, nobody in this is from the comic books, which kind of irritated me. But on the other hand, as I said before, they're always looking to sort of create their own, and I guess there's nothing to say that you can't create your own characters for these shows. I feel like with the treasure trove of characters that are in the Marvel universe, why not use some of them? But I guess, we can't get in trouble for using characters they want to use in a movie or in the Runaway show on Hulu or anywhere else if we just make up our own. So whatever. But I was happy.
It's kind of a good. I was going to say it's kind of a good way to divorce yourself from that pressure that Josh was talking about earlier of having to live up to something. If you go and you say, okay, well, hey, here's, I'm looking for those nods in other shows to. That really excites me when I see Iron Fist show up in a Luke Cage show, if that ever happens, which I'm sure it will at some point. But I'm like, oh, great, this is, or even just an allusion to that. That's great. But this series did a fine job of keeping itself by itself. which is perfectly fine with me.
Yeah, it's pretty self-contained. And I can just imagine, like, when they were doing, show running and trying to figure out what characters they were going to use. Like, they had like a wish list, and the people at Fox were just like, nope, can't use him. Nope, we're using him in X-Force. Nope, we're using him in Deadpool, and then just throwing the list out the window and said, fuck it, we'll write our own characters.
Yeah.
So just quick question. Probably should have asked this on the front end. We're spoiler. There's going to be spoiler. We're doing spoilers, right?
Oh yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I'm not really going to do spoilers in this comment, but I was just kind of curious. So, kind of to talk a little bit into, I mentioned that X-Men Legacy series, and so at the end of the first episode, I was like, okay, I'm confident they're doing the Legacy storyline now, because that whole escape thing, you kind of get all these different characters showing off different power sets during the escape, right? So in the X-Men Legacy book, the approach that they went with was he has all these different personalities in his head that most are helpful for him, and they're trying to help, but they're helping him in such different ways. He never has significant progress overall as an individual. But there are there are a handful that are genuinely negative for him. Each different personality that he has in his head controls a different power set. And so whenever he comes to terms with whatever issue has created that personality throughout his life, he regains control of that specific power set. So it was a way for them to kind of explore his power and his multiple personalities with an expressed linear goal of, if you cure your inner demons, you will control even more of your overall power. And so whenever that first episode ended, I was like, these are all different personalities, and they are all different things that he is controlling, and he has to come to terms with each of them. And at the end of the first season, he's going to come out of his shell and be this super powerful badass, combining all these particular individuals. Naturally, I was wrong about that. But at the end of that first episode, I was like, man, this is going to be so good. Because that's kind of where I saw it going, which was kind of a cool experience for me throughout the series.
Well, I think to a degree you're right, just not in the way you think, the way you initially thought. Chapter 2. At Summerland, Melanie's facility, David begins memory work with Autonomy, who remembers everything and can enter others' memories. Melanie explains that David has been captured by Division 3, a government division focused on capturing and studying mutants. She instead wants to help David by showing him that the onset of his illness was just his powers manifesting. In David's childhood memories, he is haunted by a children's book his father read to him, The World's Angriest Boy in the World, in which the title character, creepy as fuck, murders his mother. His memories before his admission to Clockworks, David took drugs with Lenny to try to block out the voices he hears. Melanie places David in an MRI scanner to study how his brain works, during which he accidentally projects his mind to present-day Clockworks, where his sister, Amy, is looking for him. Amy is kidnapped by Division 3, causing David to panic and teleport the MRI scanner outside of Summerland. David races to save Amy, but Sid convinces him to wait and master his powers first. All right. I remember this episode kind of moving a little slow for me. I think I get sort of impatient with a series like this because it's all building up to David having some degree of mastery over his powers. But in the meantime, it's a lot of, I don't know, and I don't, and I can't, and I won't, and it all hurts so much. And it's like, oh, for Christ's sake. So we just, and this is not the fault of the show. This is a personal thing, and I readily admit that. But I get a little impatient waiting for the hero to buck up, little camper. Just like, come on already. Just like, why are you fighting this so much? But, that's the story they're telling, and I guess that's fine. I have to say, the Angriest Boy in the World stuff was way creepy. But that all has at least a significant payoff once we finally get there. But boy, getting there. What a long, strange trip that was. All right, so the other thing I'll say is, and I'll throw it back to you guys, I I did enjoy the demonstration of power when he puts the MRI scanner outside, and everyone's like, "Shit." If this guy ever figures out how his powers work, he's going to be unstoppable.
It's like kind of Jesse was talking earlier, and I was also really, really eager for them to really show his overall power set, which really I don't think they ever will, because you can't. But there were, I mean, you really can't. You know, I mean, like he can literally do pretty much anything. But they gave several pretty cool glimpses of it throughout this first season, and I think that first time that we kind of had something happen where I was like, oh, that's cool, was like the whole transportation thing at the end of the second episode.
Mm-hmm.
Ronnie, what were your thoughts?
Well, I hate to say it, but you all kind of mirror. I mean, like, I mirror all of you all, and it's just you really want his powers to come out, and they do to a point, but there's no way that you can show all that of what all he can do in television, you know, in a certain amount of time, or special effects. But I mean, I hate to say it, but I completely agree with you. I mean, you know, like, my thoughts on it are the same as your all's.
I think still at chapter 2 here, I was still on the fence as to whether these guys were out to help David or not. And they come in, they're like, hey, we're here to help you. And they bring him in, and you're just like, well, these guys could be totally planning on manipulating you, and you have no idea what's going on. So I was really, at this point, I was still on the fence as to whether they were there to help him or not, or just use him for its power. And go ahead.
I was going to say, with the subject matter and the character, you're going to have a lot of what ifs and guessing, and
and on top,
you don't know what the crap is going on and everything else. So
and on top of that, you get a show. This is, I think, why I really enjoy this, is because the showrunner, Noah Hawley, he really grasped on to the mental aspect of presenting a show, and presenting it in such a way that you're like, man, this is fucked up, but it's good. And he also, the use of visuals is amazing. I mean, we're early in this. Yeah. We're at chapter 2 here, but I'm just saying, if you guys keep an eye out, and if this is one of those series where if you go back and watch it again, you will start to see some things that are kind of repetitive. One of the things that I remember hearing, I don't know if we're going to talk about this tonight or not, but whatever, I'm going to bring it up anyway. The use of red. When you saw red on the screen, usually shit was about to go down. Something either was going to go down, or it was a representation of the devil with the yellow eyes, or something, or David's anger. The other thing is dogs. There are a lot of dogs in these episodes, and specifically when I watched the series finale, I know we're not there yet, but this was after I'd listened to all these, all these refresher podcasts that I was doing as I was making my long ass trips back and forth to the house. But there are a lot of references to dogs, and I'll bring up another one here in a second, which we'll talk about, which is the main focus of one episode. But regardless, so if anybody out there hasn't watched the series yet, red and dogs, just keep those two things in mind, and you'll actually start to see. So, and that's all from the showrunner's head. He put that all in there. Josh, you watched Westworld, right?
Yeah.
I mean, were you Westworlding the shit out of this show? Like, were you like, okay, that person's a so-and-so, or that person's that, or, I mean, were you doing things like that?
the first 3 or 4 episodes, I was really obsessing over whether they're doing the legacy story. I know I keep referencing that, but I love that storyline and that whole concept so much. I was like, man, are they doing this? I think this is real. I think this is not real. And so to a degree, I definitely was, but about halfway through, I kind of just gave in. I was like, you know what? It doesn't even matter because this story is really good no matter what. I need to stop obsessing over what I'm expecting it to be and just go along for the ride.
You're not going to get answers to everything, and everything that shows up on the screen is not going to have a reason. Like in this chapter 2, they go and do this like drug, and I'm sitting there going, well, what's the drug? What is that? What is this blue smoke coming out of this frog? And then you don't get an answer to that. There's nothing there. I don't even know what the hell that is. Was there something I missed?
No, I mean, it's not. I think the overall purpose of that aspect, like the drug itself is not important. It's just the fact that there was a time in his life where he has clearly serious mental issues, and he was also doing some sort of psychedelic, mind-altering substance, and it really just reflected. Because if you recall, whenever they were going through that particular scene, it was usually through some flashback storytelling with him and the psychologist. And I took that as just a focus, a kind of a highlight on the fact that not only is he not well mentally, there was a long period of time where he specifically made it worse. He willingly made it worse, and this is a highlight of that particular time and everything that he went through.
Yeah, so there's a perfect example of seeing something on the show and obsessing about it, and then realizing, well, you don't need to. Just go on.
You know, I really
live in the moment.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say that was sort of my approach to this show. Was I didn't want to get hung up on minutia or what is that? You know, I just sort of let the show tell me the story it wanted to tell me, and I definitely had a lot of what the fuck moments over the course of 8 episodes. But I just kind of sat back and I was a very passive viewer. You know, I didn't try to think too much about it. I was like, well, let me just see what's happening here. You know, let's just let them tell the story they want to tell. And, you know, I know that just the nature of the show is things are not what they seem. Mm-hmm. Which brings us to chapter 3. David continues memory work with Tanami and Melanie, exploring his time taking drugs before his admission to Clockworks. As they watch this unfold, David is haunted by apparitions. His mind works against Tanami's powers, and he accidentally teleports their physical bodies to a different room. While undergoing more tests, David again loses control, projecting both his mind and Sid's to Division 3, where they find Amy being interrogated. One of her interrogators, a mutant called the Eye, sees these projections before they return to their bodies. Melanie explains that the Eye is Walter, one of the founders of Summerland, alongside her missing husband, Oliver, and the scientist Carrie Loudermilk. Desperate for a breakthrough with David, Melanie sedates him to the point where she, Tanami, and Sid can enter his mind and explore freely. However, his memories work against them, with an embodiment of the world's angriest boy in the world chasing them through a version of David's childhood, until they were all forced out of David's head. There were some real horror elements in this episode. You know, you have the book.
Yeah, they're really
chewing on Melanie's hand at one point. You know, the constant stalking by the angriest boy in the world. You know, this definitely was one of the creepier episodes. You know, in terms of tone, this series shifts a lot. Because, you know, you have the first episode, which kind of has a comic booky hero feel to it, especially towards the end. And then you have this one where it's just more horror elements to it. It's just it's a very, I don't want to call it unbalanced, because that would be more of a criticism, but it's a show that's not afraid to shift tone depending on what part of the story they want to tell you, which I thought was interesting. Is it this episode or the fourth one that starts with Oliver and that rambling speech? And then the 20-minute dance thing at the end?
I think
it's possibly the next
one. I think that
one.
was 4. I can't remember.
Yeah, we'll talk. Then I'll wait till 4 to bring that up again. But yeesh. All right, guys, chapter 3, hit it.
Josh?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It was very. This was a completely different series in tone. This episode in particular, and I love that throughout the entire season. That maybe not so dramatically as this one had the clear horror feel to it, but they let the story tell itself rather than, okay, this is how the series needs to feel. It was clear glimpses into David's life, especially these first couple, 3, 4, in his past, in his time with his psychologist, and whatever topic or time frame in his life they were going through, that's the tone that they let the episode take, and not just through telling the story, but again, as we said earlier, with the visuals, with the audio, with the way the show was edited, the different things that you see at different times and maybe for a half second of a glimpse or something of that nature. And it was again, the first couple 3, as the overall story arc ultimately found itself at the end of the season, probably slower in story development in general, but really it's all about giving you context for David in general. Once you finish the series and you look back on those first 2 or 3, you're like, you know what, that felt slow, but there was a reason for it.
Yeah, it doesn't get repetitive, but it can feel like that at some point. How many times did we see that kitchen shot? Where he was. The
first 3 or 4 episodes, that was way too much.
Yeah, we're just like, back in there at the kitchen again. We're back there at the kitchen again. But I think what he's trying to drive home is that, okay, this is something significant happened. Of course, that's what they were trying to find out also. Mm-hmm. But something significant happened there. I think
that was the first time that his powers had ever really come out on some level that he was like, what is happening?
Yeah.
And that was a potential turning point in his life.
I want to ask Ronnie about the eye. Oh, Walter. Ronnie, you remember that? Let's say best way to describe this guy. Oh, curly, redheaded dude, scary looking, doesn't say a damn thing like throughout most of the series.
Eye.
The eye.
Yeah.
Ronnie, what do you think of that guy?
It's always the quiet ones.
I was really
dude.
At first I really thought that was Mastermind.
Yeah, I remember you mentioned that in the text.
He looks that guy looks somewhat similar to as I remember it, and then I think I looked back, I was like, he doesn't look anything like that. But like whenever they had was it X-Men 2, the second actual movie where they had Mastermind, who was what's his name's son in the chair that he just used in the movie. Maybe you don't remember that, but that's what it reminded me of. His look was, yeah. But his look was similar to that. I was like, oh, dude, if this is Mastermind. And then he kind of started, they were implying that he had these psychic powers, like, oh, it's Mastermind. And then, like, it was pretty clear it wasn't Mastermind. But it was,
what's your name?
The way But whenever they introduced him and gave him a little bit more time, he was super creepy, too.
Yeah, he pulled that off pretty well. I can remember, watching him in those early episodes. He just doesn't say a word, and he just kind of nods. You can tell he's in control. And then when he starts seeing, that David is in the astral plane or wherever the hell he's at, he's got clearly some kind of power, and it might be, I don't think it's as strong as David's, but it's definitely as formidable.
It's the greatest use of fear is not what you know is going to happen, but what you think is going to happen.
True.
So, keeping him silent and keeping you kind of guessing one of the best things was keeping you guessing at who he is and what he can do and everything else was actually done very well in my opinion.
All right. Let's move on to chapter 4 here. David does not wake up from the sedative, and the others are unable to trust the memories, quote-unquote, they have seen. Melanie sends Sid and Tonomy to find David's ex-girlfriend, Philly, to find out what actually happened before he was admitted to Clockworks along with Carrie, a warrior woman who lives inside Carrie and only comes out for action. All right, can we just stop here for a second and talk about some of these other characters?
Sure.
Is it just me, or is Tanami fucking a douchebag? Okay, I mean, this guy, and he'll do more as the series goes on, where by the end of it, you really just want to punch him right in the face. I had to read the wiki on Carrie and Kerry because I didn't realize they were the same person at first, and that his mutant power was basically this girl living inside of him. And really, who doesn't have a hot Latina chick living inside of us?
All day.
All day long, baby. I mean, of the secondary characters, Sid is the only one that I don't want to strangle through this entire series. Because you have, I mean, Carrie's not bad, but, you know, he's got the nerdy scientist thing going on, and he only becomes really interesting after the shared hallucination that they're in the asylum, where he splits off from Kerry, you know, and then they're having issues.
Yeah.
But back to Tanami, am I alone in thinking he's a douchebag?
I didn't have a problem with the guy. I'm trying to figure out what
I think the Carries were probably like easily my favorite secondary character in this whole series.
Okay.
Carrie or Carrie?
Both. They're the same person.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, they're two sides of the same personality, and that whole dynamic and the way it was introduced, and the first episode you see him, you just see him kind of talking to. You just figure he's talking to himself. He's like, "No, Carrie, we're not going to do that. We can't do that. You don't see."
Oh, that's right.
Yet.
That is right.
So you just think that some of these people are just kind of maybe crazy too. And then the second episode that he's in, the way they introduce her is really cool because he's still kind of, it seems like he's talking to himself, and the camera kind of pans around the room, and she just comes into view, and you're like, there wasn't anybody in the room. What the hell is that? And then I think it's the episode after that where they actually do this meld and combine, and you kind of learn that that's their power or whatever. And I really like the way that was introduced, and I love the dynamic between those two particular characters, or character, whatever you want to say it.
All right, but back to Tanami. Damn it.
Yeah, tell us why. Tell us why you don't like this guy.
Tanami.
I just, you know, if he's not wanting to shoot somebody with a stupid Tommy gun, you know, he's just like, I get why they wrote him the way they did, and it is interesting. I personally struggle with somebody who is supposed to be one of the good guys, yet keeps saying and doing things that make you want to root against him. Like, I felt bad that later on the guy with the telekinetic powers is the one that's going to eat the bullet and not Tanami.
Oh.
You know, we should kill everybody. We should kill the humans. We should kill David. David's not worth saving. It's like, shut up. You're such a whiner. I don't know. I guess you have to have a character like that, a sort of a doubting Thomas, to create tension. But I thought they overdid it with how negative he was.
He was kind of the only one that made sense in that last episode where they're like, yeah, we should kill. He's like, yeah, why we should kill Clark? Why would we not kill Clark? Like this, like why would we let this guy live? And everybody's like, we can't commit murder. I'm like, God, like that whole hero dynamic, like. I don't know. I've always seen that as kind of not really realistic. Like, not everybody's going to be like, we can't murder. Like, this guy's trying to kill them all for all 8 episodes, and they're all like, we can't kill him. And I've always seen that as like, man, like nobody is that ultra, like that.
Yeah.
Clear cut.
Yeah.
All right,
but,
so
he said that. I was like,
here.
yes,
Okay.
of course you kill him. Of course. It's like, I think that's the only time I was like, yes, this guy. Okay, yes.
All right. right, so I'm alone here. Got it. Moving on. Tommy enters Philly's memories and investigates the office of David's old psychologist pool and learns that David's friend was a man named Benny, not a woman named Lenny, and that David attacked Poole, who now lives in a lighthouse and a van down by the river. At the lighthouse, the trio began discussing David with Poole until he reveals himself to be the Eye. With the lighthouse surrounded by Division 3 soldiers, meanwhile, back in the city, David's mind is trapped in the astral plane where he comes across a trapped Oliver. David refuses to wait for the rescue with Oliver and instead escapes himself with the encouragement from an apparition of Lenny. David rescues the others from the Eye, but the latter shoots Kerry as he escapes. Yes. This is the one that begins with narration from Oliver and then ends with him doing a little dance, making a little love, and getting down tonight. Yeah.
Well, when you put it that way,
I can only take surrealism so far. It's just so much. And, in the midst of this, because I really like the escape sequence, where they're trying to get away from Division 3 and, they're being chased by the Eye and Sid's jumping bodies and all this other stuff is happening. There's a lot of great tension there. And then, in the middle of it, he's doing a boot scoot. He's getting down. He's shaking his booty. And I'm like, why? What does this have to do with anything? It was like, at the end of Return of the Jedi, you have Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader clashing lightsabers, and just like from left field, in walks the Rockette, who just da 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 da, and it's like, what? Why are they here? Well, why not? It's surreal.
The dance stuff was definitely really weird, and it didn't. I would say it definitely didn't really fit, except that it did fit because it was really weird. If that makes any sense, like the whole series is there's so many moments you're like, what the hell was that? That by the time that came around, you're like, okay, sure, whatever. Let's this is just kind of more of the weirdness than success. We're in weirdness. You've got me. I'm confused.
It's completely a tonal thing. It is completely there to give you that tone of the series, and I'm right there, man. I remember watching that, going, okay, all right. And now here's the thing:
didn't that come along at a point of positivity for the David character though? Like, wasn't he at kind of like a pretty good place at that point compared to the previous episodes?
Possibly.
Well, David's arc is, as time went on, he started to become more in tune with his powers. In becoming in tune with his powers, he was creating a stronger Shadow King. So, and that's what leads to the next bit, where where he slaughters all of Division 3 in rescuing Amy. That's the thing. It's like he starts off where, if you take a step back from Legion and look at, now that we know, from soup to nuts how this goes, put yourself in the character of the Shadow King for a moment. He has this guy that he's been feeding off of for all of his life, but he can only go so far because the character is only so much developed, And then through working with the Summerland group, he starts to become more confident and starts to become more powerful. And in doing so, he's making the Shadow King more powerful, which in turn creates a situation where the Shadow King is able to corrupt and take over more of David, to the point where they realize, hey, wait a minute, we have to separate the Shadow King out from David, or he'll be lost forever. Which is one of the things I really liked about this show, was they were accidentally creating the big nemesis that they didn't even know was there. They don't know that he's got this parasite living inside of him until much later on in the episode. Meanwhile, they're giving him all of these tools to create this horrible entity that they're going to have to then deal with, and is obviously, as we'll find out, going to continue to haunt them in season 2. So all of that I really liked, and I think it's one of the reasons why I think the next episode that we're going to talk about is and to me is one of the better ones, and really where the show takes off, because these first 4 were a little bit of a slog for me to get through, but the second half of the season is where it starts to get good.
Well, the second half of the season starts to have kind of more of a direct story flow too. Like the first couple 3, 4 are all intentionally bizarre, confusing, and in many ways non-linearly told, in my opinion, so that you have a frame of reference for like David's madness. And I'm not. We'll get into it again. We'll get into it more at the end. But like I'm not entirely sold that he doesn't have mental issues. Period. Like I think that'll be a really interesting thing for them to explore in the second season. We'll get into that once we get to the kind of last episode.
All right, Ronnie, you wanna talk about the relevance and the symbolism of a hipster dancing with his ass shaking in the camera?
I'd rather not.
No.
Well, I mean, just like you said, the bizarre nature of everything that's happening. Just like Josh said, you're not going to get mad. You're just going to be like, yeah, okay, everything else that's happened. Why not? You're not going to have an episode of David just going out grocery shopping and doing something normal. It's going to have something. I need milk. No, you need a hipster dancing, shaking his rear end. That's what you're going to get. So,
hey, Ronnie, I know I've told you how watching shows with my wife, and like when we watch a show or a movie that has like the most craziest vague ending or where everybody dies or something like that, I don't know how she even put up with me watching this show. She would sit down and watch every single episode with me, but at the end I'd look over at her and she would have this face like
visibly shaking with rage.
Why do I torture myself for my husband every night? But yes,
does
that right there.
I'm
surprised she came back.
Ending anymore? Like does
that?
any show not have? Does any show have an episode that doesn't have an ambiguous ending anymore, though?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like every show on TV had some ending where it's like, you're going to watch the next one. And you're like, just let me enjoy the show. I don't.
This was kind of like the antithesis of a cliffhanger, though. You got old Mr. 70s there dancing the jig while he's got his record player going. Mindy's not, my wife is not like, okay, I'm coming back for the next one. But she did, so. That's hilarious.
I watch The Walking Dead, so I'm used to stuff like that.
I don't watch that anymore.
Oh, right then.
No, I mean like
all right.
I'm used to come back and watch the next show.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna say I haven't seen Rick Grimes shaking his ass.
Yeah. There are no butt shaking hipsters on The Walking Dead.
You can.
That's next season.
You can probably count the episodes of The Walking Dead that didn't end in some absurdly excessive cliffhanger on one hand. Like episode 4 of season 3, and it's like that's the biggest cliffhanger yet. And this is not really an important moment. I don't understand. Like they went way too far with that on that show. Not going to get sidetracked, but continue.
All right, chapter 5. Carrie is brought back to Summerland where Carrie heals her. David tells Melanie about Oliver, who's dancing a jig in an ice cube, and demonstrates his mastery of the astral plane by creating a room where he and Sid can be together. That was fun stuff. Without her physical powers. Yes.
It is.
Sid's naked ass. Yes. The highlight of the series, Sid's naked ass. Let's just talk about Sid's ass for a few minutes. How round it is, how wonderful. Anyway.
Oh, Mark.
What? I like a nice ass.
Nothing.
Listen, Mark was so enthralled with her ass. That was all he commented. Somebody would make a comment about that most recent episode of Legion, and then Mark would leave like 3 words.
Sid's naked ass.
3 words. Sid's naked ass. I was like, I knew that shit was going to happen.
Oh, my goodness. Thank you, Hollywood. David soon escapes to rescue Amy, and Melanie's team arrives at Division 3 to find almost everyone moited by David. After going over the ladder scans, Carrie deduces that David's mind is infected with a parasite that he knows as the gruesome devil with yellow eyes. Devil with the blue dress on. Dun, 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 dun. David takes Amy to their childhood home, where she reveals that he was adopted. Lenny appears to emerge from David's mind and explain that she has been in control of his body. Well, if anyone's going to be in control of your body, it should be Aubrey Plaza. I agree. I'm okay with this. Yes. Melanie's team tracks them to the house, followed by the Eye, and find Lenny attacking David. The Eye shoots at David in the longest fucking bullet shot in the history of bullet time. Jesus, Mary and Joseph.
Several episodes, right? 2 or 3 episodes.
Yeah, it's 2 episodes of this one bullet. One. And Sid has him take...
What's the cartoon that lasts like 16 episodes for one move?
Oh, DBZ?
Yeah, Dragon Ball Z episode. He starts powering up, and then 2 seasons later.
And Sid has him take him to the astral room. There, David is helpless as the devil with the yellow eyes attacks Sid until he wills their entire group to an astral fantasy. They are patients of Clockworks under the care of Lenny. Yes. I really enjoyed this episode. First of all, the Shadow King manipulating David as he runs through Division 3, just murdering people left and right, was hilarious. Especially with him dancing.
Yeah, and the thing that stood out the most for me in this episode was at the very beginning, like David, he clearly had a completely different personality, and I was like, did we miss something? Did we actually watch? Did we miss an episode? Did we miss something at the end of the last one? But obviously that plays itself out in the episode, and you realize that he's pretty much completely lost control. But I was like, I like this. I like a confident David. This is really interesting and cool, and you kind of... You don't get that the rest of the season, but you get more and more glimpses of it as he gets a little bit more control. So it was kind of another way for them to be a little bit non-linear in his overall development through the fact that Shadow King had complete control of him, and it wasn't really him, but it was almost kind of foreshadowing into something that he was going to gradually acquire throughout the remaining, 3 episodes at that point.
And that's what I was saying before. This is what I was waiting for. I was waiting for a character... who even if he had been manipulated and turned evil in some way, was at least confident in his powers and able to do stuff. I mean, maybe it's a simplistic point of view, but if you're going to make a comic book movie, I want to see people using their powers. I don't really care how you use them. I just want to see you use them. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I just people talking in a room is fine, but you can do that with anything. You don't need comic book characters to do people talking in a room. With that said, the bit in the house was again, we went back to creepy, and of course you have that final shot there where the Eye is shooting with the gun and Sid is trying to protect David, and it was all very, very weird.
Is this the episode where the sound goes completely off?
Yes.
Like there's no...
Yeah.
I was worried something was wrong with my TV because they're sitting there talking, and I'm like, what is going on? Now, let me tell you something. That right there is another great... I think it's another great use of how this guy told the story. And almost to a degree of manipulating the viewer where, I think, he completely did this on purpose to make people do that. And they really didn't make it overt that there were a couple spots where they were trying to shout. And I was like, are they trying to shout and they can't hear themselves? Or is my TV off and they're actually shouting at each other and I don't understand what's going on? And I didn't have captions at the time, but man, that was something that I think if it was that particular episode, I told you guys, it's like, when we do this discussion, that has to be that's got to be something that I bring up because they did it was just another great way of telling part of this story and using the visual medium and the audio medium that a television show uses in a unique way. and tying it in with this story. It was great. I mean, I loved this episode. I think this was my favorite episode of the whole series.
Oh yeah, you've got Sid's naked ass, David killing people.
Check.
You've got creepy shit happening in a haunted house.
Check.
And the slowest bullet time in history. It's all great.
Oh,
it's all great.
Perfect.
You got everything you need.
That's an actual nightmare for me. Like I've had like bad dreams or nightmares or whatever where I'm dreaming somebody has like walked into my house or walked into my room or whatever, and I'm trying to warn everyone. I'm trying to yell and I can't. And
nobody can hear you, or you can't say anything.
Yeah, I can't get sound out of my body, and that's usually where I wake up. So yeah, that was particularly. I definitely related to that. Sort of
stuff like
thing.
that.
My goodness.
Stuff like that is on the forefront.
I said that's particularly horrifying.
Yeah. Jesse, do you want to finish your point?
Oh yeah, I was going to say that that's stuff like that mental anguish or those dreams, nightmares. You could tell that's on the forefront of what this guy, the showrunner, really wants to bring forth. There were so many odd things that showed up in this episode where I was just like, or not this episode, the series, where it's just like, man, that is more. This guy has a handle on like the dream-like plane. The astro, I don't want to call it the astral plane, but the dreamscape, I guess, is probably the best way to put it. It just seems like he's taking a lot of notes on horrifying shit that happens in people's minds, and it comes across in here.
All right, Chapter 6. This is the We're Back at Clockworks episode. This is also the one that ends in the creepiest lap dance in history, by the way. That's what stood out to me. At the very end where Lenny is just like, I don't need you, David. I just need your body. As she's, ramming her ass on his pelvis, and then he's trapped in like a coffin. I can't tell you how many of my lap dances ended that way. Anywho, in a shared hallucination, Lenny discusses personal issues with each of the team, such as Melanie's refusal to let go of her long-missing husband, Autonomy having seen his mother die when he was only a child, Though most of the group are unaware of the true nature of their surroundings, Sid notices that their new reality is different from the one in her memories. Lenny confronts Sid and places her in a coma. Carrie is visited by Oliver, who takes him to his home on the astral plane. Carrie goes looking for Carrie, but is attacked and chased by the Eye. And again, one of the creepier bits of the episode. Oliver appears to Melanie and leads her to the physical room where their bodies are. Time appears to have slowed down with their physical bodies frozen, and the bullets shot by the Eye having not yet reached Sid and David. Lenny, who is shown to be another form of the devil with the yellow eyes, reveals that she once knew David's biological father and specifically targeted David. She then shows her control of his mind by locking David away in a corner of his own mind. All right, so a couple of things with this. One, when they ended up back in Clockworks, what was your initial reaction, Josh?
When was it again? What moment?
When they initially, starting with the very end of 5 and then going into episode 6, when they flashed back to Clockworks and you see them all in a group, and you don't know if this is real or not. You don't know if this is a hallucination or if this is reality and that David was imagining all this other stuff. What was your reaction when they first showed up in Clockworks?
I was pretty clear that that was definitely all going on in his head, and that the Shadow King was manipulating it, because I don't recall. I don't think we've mentioned it. When was the specific point? What episode did they specifically say, okay, this is the Shadow King? Because I feel like it was like that episode or the episode before it, But the episode before, they actually identified it as the Shadow King. Something happened, and I was like, I messaged a buddy of mine. I was like, so it's Shadow King, right? He's like, yeah, it's definitely the Shadow King. So, like, whenever I put that all together at the end of that episode, like, it kind of frustrated me because I really did want it all to have been fake and all in his head, and it all kind of go back to that X-Men Legacy storyline I talked about. But they had pretty clearly dropped a lot of hints about the devil with the yellow eyes and it being the Shadow King that I knew that episode was all going to be kind of the Shadow King's manipulation to try to get them off track.
Hey, Josh, do you remember what the dog's name that David had that didn't exist?
I don't.
It was King.
Really?
Yeah,
because that was they pointed out that was the first. They implied at any point that was the first time that the Shadow King made an actual manifestation, because in from his visual hallucination of it, because there were several flashbacks later on where it goes back and shows him interacting with that dog, and the dog's clearly not there.
Yep.
Neat.
How
Neato.
When they flashed into Clockworks, what was your reaction?
Me?
That's you, Ronnie.
You're
Adams.
Ronnie.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear. Man, my whole reaction to this is to this whole series has been like, what? But I mean, so I kind of have the same reaction to everything that happens in this whole series, but it definitely was still confused at what's going on and what's happening, but I guess I just kind of got to leave it at that, because it's hard for me to keep up with the more cerebral storylines and things like that. It's not hard for me to keep up. I keep up, but as I mentioned, I've got a ton of other things going on with work and everything. So I'm trying to concentrate on the series, and it kind of jumps around. But so I just go along for the ride, but it was still the whole thing is left me kind of confused. But it's still pretty cool. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you. Let me go ahead there. What I was going to say was I remember when we jumped right there, I was like, oh, okay, here we go. So nothing's real, and we're back at this is actually going to be reality. That's where I was like, okay, this is now reality. Aubrey Plaza's not been in his mind. She's always running through mine, but I mean, she's not been in his, and see how I smoothly put that in there. Anyway. Anyway, yeah, I immediately thought, well, okay, now this is where actual things are going down, but then you started getting the hints as we go into that following episode that things aren't right, that things are definitely not right.
I mean, it just like I said, you get that hint for the whole freaking series, because
that's the truth, dude.
It's one of those things where, man, sometimes I really like the stuff that's it may or may not be real, and it may or you gotta have to kind of figure out where the trips inside the mind start and the real stuff begins.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm kind of like I said, I was kind of like one of those. I just kind of like threw my hands up and said, let it go. Let's just go. What's happening right now? Let it, just don't try to figure it out. Just enjoy for what it is.
I think my initial reaction when at the end of 5, going to 6 was, oh no, but it was definitely one of those where I think really for the first time in the entire series, I couldn't wait for the next episode. I wanted to see what they were going to do. This was also the first time I got a true sense of menace, purposeful menace from the Shadow King. Because up to this point, it's all been, they'll show the devil with yellow eyes walking across the room, or it'll be the angriest boy in the world stalking them, but it's all kind of horror monster stuff. This was the first time I thought there was a direct attack on David, and it's what do you do with an overpowered mutant? Well, you have to create tension. You have to create a certain threat, and they handled that in a great way with this, by saying, the way that you threaten David is by taking over his mind, trapping his mind in a corner of his consciousness, and taking over his body. I'm like, okay, really for the first time in the entire season, I'm getting a sense of what the villain is, who the villain is, what the villain wants, and how they're going to, enact their plan. And with so many big blue light in the sky, comic book things, and I'm going to take over the world, it's fun to see something this small, this personal.
Yeah.
So
I also
that was
really
like
liked I also really liked the. I don't know if it was this episode or the next one. I think it was this episode, but like the clear connection that they made to the shadow between Xavier and the Shadow King. Like they don't go, they're not explicit about it being Xavier, but there's a point where they show his wheelchair wheel with the X, and so if you know half of anything about the general universe, you know that already, or if you didn't, now you do. But the fact that they tied in the history of the Shadow King and his father, that's really awesome, because that's straight out of the comic books. I mean, Shadow King's an X-Men villain, but he's an Xavier villain before he's anything else.
Yeah.
Right. So you also get a sense of, purpose. I mean, one of the complaints I have about this is that I feel like at times the series gets a little meandering. But this, they actually have a real problem. They're all about to be shot.
Yeah.
And there's a sense of, what do we do here? How do we stop the bullets from killing David and Sid, and how do we get out of the situation? And, oh, by the way, we're also in this shared hallucination. What do we do about that? And, oh, by the way, the Shadow King has taken over David's mind, and it's dark out and there are wolves after them. So there's a lot going on here. Chapter 7. On the astral plane, Oliver stops dancing long enough to explain to Carrie that he has been watching David and believes the parasite is Amul Farouk. We are the nation of domination, the Shadow King. A powerful mutant that they are both aware of. Carrie explains that his physical body holds a device that may be able to isolate the parasite from David's mind temporarily. Carrie wakes Sid and sends her to help the others, while he and Oliver and Melanie attempt to affect the physical world by getting the device to David. Farouk in the nation, as Lenny attacks Sid, Carrie in the eye, killing the latter. His physical body dies as well. David figures out that Farouk and his father were both powerful. I loved this scene, by the way. The scene in the classroom where British David is talking to American David about
yes,
that,
yeah,
that was all great. That was one of the highlights of the season for me. Both powerful mutants who had fought some time ago, with Farouk losing. His father then put David up for adoption to protect him from Farouk, like you do. But the latter was able to find David and infect his mind since he was young. With the device locking Farouk away in David's mind, he returns to his physical body and catches the bullet. No more bullets. No more bullets. The group then returns to Summerland, but are attacked there by Division 3, and Farouk begins to break free.
Okay. Now, did they totally gloss over what happened? Okay, no, they did not. Although it was certainly, they just said killing the eye. Now, let's go ahead and talk about how the eye met his demise, because that was probably one of the most fucked up things I'd seen on a TV show in a long time.
They put him in a box, in a very small box.
They made him a box.
He's an eye in a box.
Oh my gosh, man!
Eye in a box.
Well, what was crazy was, okay, here's what I was trying to figure out. You know, I was watching this trying to think, okay, how are they going to represent this in the real world? Because in the astral plane or whatever it is, the eye is pretty much folded up in like origami. I mean, it's just horrible. You just see him, all sorts of cracking sounds and fluids flying and all sorts of stuff. And now that, not like that, Ronnie. Anyway, it gets folded up, and then of course we follow the story as they are trying to get back into the real world and into real time, and then finally when they do, well, at one point they show it like in slow-mo where in real life the eye is standing there and he's got this this grimace on his face and blood is slowly going down his head, and then finally when they get into real time and they're all kind of standing around, they look over at the eye and he just completely folds up into nothing. And just, I mean, it was, oh my gosh. That was probably, again, the visuals of this show. And because I thought, well, maybe he'll just, since he died in the not physical world, he's just going to keel over in the physical world. Nope, that's not the case. He folded up there just as well. But man, crazy stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty gruesome.
Yeah, it's all right.
Yeah. In the end, he died. Apparently, that's all it had on the. All the impact it had on Mr. Whoever edited the wiki here. I would have wrote a paragraph.
You win some, you lose some. Sometimes you turn into a shirt, sometimes you don't. All right. Just kind of so we can get to the last chapter here and bring this to a conclusion. What did Ronnie? What did you think here of chapter 7?
I'm with Jesse. The thing that stuck out with me is how the origami, the man who wanted to be the origami swan, I guess you could say, or anything. So it's cool to see them taking, especially you're going to take chances and risks in this kind of show anyway. But it's cool to see them really going out on a limb with a death like this, and in my opinion. But it's more of me sitting back and watching it and hoping I get all the puzzle pieces fall together by the end, which they don't. But you do. They do. You get. I don't want to say you get any kind of closure or anything like that. Because you absolutely do not. But it was the whole series has been excellent. So it was an excellent episode.
Josh?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, probably the episode before this, but at this point, like, the end game is clear. Like, this is probably one of the first times that you see 100% for sure where the series is going and how you think it will conclude, and now you're just kind of curious about how it's now everything has been so weird and up to this point, and it's so clear and straightforward that you're almost confused by that aspect, and you're like, is it really going to be that straightforward?
Yeah, I
don't want to put my trust in anything in this show.
Well, what I liked about 7 was, we've spent the last couple of episodes dealing with the shared hallucination, and and David dealing with now that the enemy really has a name and a face to call out, how are they going to deal with it? They more or less tied all that up, and it was like, and then with the reintroduction of Clark in Division 3, they're like, oh yeah, there's this one last thing we have to deal with. So that's one of the things I liked about 7 was like, okay, we finally had kind of an unambiguous ending to an episode. Thank God. Like, hey, we put the halo on David. That trapped Farouk. We've got everyone's escaped. David uses powers to catch the bullets. It's all good. And we can finally really move forward because they know what they're dealing with. And then just as soon as they do that, whoops, there's Division 3.
I was really surprised when they ended it, and they brought him back at the end of that episode, where I thought he was dead, along with everybody else that in that first episode. So I think that was a big thing for me, was when they showed up with Division 3, and here it is, old, half scarred, half burnt up. What was his name? Clark? Did you say?
Clark. Yeah.
Yep.
Clark. Yeah. I mean, I didn't expect him to return at all.
Mhm.
I don't know why, but I really like that character. I like the Clark character, and especially with episode 8, like you get like the season finale is almost like one quarter, like his kind of backstory after the whole like explosion and him recovering from the burn, which I was kind of surprised with. I was like, this is a lot of time for. Like,
I'm right there with you.
Got maybe 7 minutes of screen time up to now.
And he even seemed more like a puppet to me in the first episode than anybody else. He seemed like just the standard government guy. I thought the Eye had more clout than this guy did. And I was like, well, he's going to fucking meet his end. And I thought he did. And then now all of a sudden he's back at the end of Chapter 7. And then we're going to devote all this time to chapter, to talking about him in the next episode, in the final episode.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, that's a great transition into Chapter 8. I like the way that they began it. As much as I was sort of impatient, it's like, oh, what's going to happen? The other thing I was thinking about was, as powerful as David is, when he shows up with Division 3, I'm like, how is this in any way a threat? David just has to, bat his eye, his eyelids, and everyone dies.
He makes a
and sure enough,
go into the atmosphere.
He made a people tree.
Yeah. Which leads to one of the great lines of the entire series. He was like, what I'm afraid of is someday you guys will figure out just how powerful you really are, and you'll realize you don't have to listen to us.
Yeah.
Because you're gods. And I was like, that's so true. One of the big complaints I've had about Marvel Comics is, and we've talked about this before, is that they've created this universe of overpowered heroes, which is fine, but then you have to figure out something to do with them. And I like the idea that you have an entire group of people who don't yet know just how powerful they really are. It's been the great irony of the mutant comics where you have all of these superpowered individuals running from unpowered humans, and the humans keep winning. They whether it be Sentinels or through the use of the government or whatever. It's a funny sort of balance between the mutants and the non-mutants, but that's a conversation I think for another day. In any case, this all, without getting into all like the minutia of Chapter 8, Clark sees the threat of the Shadow King as they're trying to get the Shadow King out of David once and for all. Shadow King nearly kills David, and Sid has to get involved, and then we have the body transferring chain thing happening. In any case, this leads to a confrontation between David and the Shadow King, who at this point is using Carrie's body. The Shadow King is knocked out of Carrie's body, ends up getting into Oliver's body, and of course Oliver takes off, looking for somebody, presumably. That's how that part of the episode ends. But this is where Clark realizes that not all mutants are bad, and that he realizes that some mutants are going to be a real problem for all of humanity, and if he doesn't partner up with the good mutants, this is going to be a problem. So he says, I'll talk to Division 3, which is more or less where we leave things. You have the mid-credit scene where some ball shows up, scans David, and then sucks David into it. You have David again yelling, help me get out of here. Like, you just do your thing. Like, I don't understand what's happening here.
And that's what I was like, I'm really curious to see, because up to that point, like, it's pretty well wrapped up. Like, season 1 is pretty well wrapped up, with the exception of the fact that the Shadow King's out there. But even then, the Shadow King basically implies that like he's done with this piece and he's just gonna go. Like he's got the next chapter of whatever he's going to do going forward, and he's done with David and all of this. That's how it felt. So, like, at the end as the credits are going on, you're like, well, that's a nice, neat little package. And then, like, the post-credit scenes, you're like, okay, so this will be kind of what leads you into season 2. And then the sphere comes down, and you're like, oh, okay, what's that going to be? I did not figure it would suck him into it. But, yeah, that was very weird, like a whole lot of questions. And I was kind of hoping for, if they were going to do a cliffhanger, something that maybe alluded to something that maybe really deep comic fans would be able to pontificate on, if not.
Sure.
I didn't want something where I was like, okay, this is definitely going to be like some other characters, the main thing.
There's
like,
the
I wanted
Shi'ar.
it to be ambiguous. Yeah, whoa. Dude, that would be... Dude, if they went with the Shi'ar to drive into the second season, I cannot say that I would ever watch the second season.
Well,
but I was really kind of hopeful they would do that. And then I was like, the only thing that I can think of is whatever that little sphere that floats around with Phantom X, and I couldn't even think what that is. I was like, that's not going to happen. That would be done anyway. It's like it doesn't. I don't know what they're going with that cliffhanger.
That's not their style. I mean, I don't think they are going to give us something that we can go, okay, yeah, this is going to be the, so and so from the comics. Clearly, again, they've made a point to divorce themselves from that, and what we're seeing now, it's just that cliffhanger is just that it's not going to. I don't think it's going to be anything that we have any idea about. It's just going to be mind-warping stuff again.
The only thing that I could think of that might give us some hint is that, Chris Claremont created David Haller in the comic books, and he also created the Shadow King in the comics. So I don't know if they're sticking to that as maybe a theme for, some of the Chris Claremont creations as maybe something to tie everything to, or if that was just an opening season thing. But I think the Shadow King thing made perfect sense. It's like Mark said, like what type of troubles do you pose to someone who is basically all powerful once he realizes it? And that's exactly what the Shadow King's power set is, his history with Xavier and all that. It's perfect.
It's mental manipulation.
To see how I'm hoping that maybe they go with that X-Men Legacy. I was thinking, well, if they wrap up the Shadow King thing, now David has to cope with who he is really who he actually is now. And I think that they should kind of stick with him having some actual mental health issues and maybe some aspects of multiple personality, and maybe some of the people introduced this season weren't actually real or something. I don't know. I'm really curious about how they're going to do it, because I think that this is a fantastic character who is, while he's all-powerful, the way that they approach that power just opens it up for so many really cool different stories that, especially with how they delivered and executed this first season, I'm on board. Like, I'm sold.
All right. Last question, and then we're going to wrap. Anyone want to hazard a guess as to what the ball is?
As to
I have zero idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have no idea.
All right. I think it's. I will say this.
Really
I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you what it is. I wouldn't even be able to hazard a guess. But I do think it's going to be something friendly. I think they've got enough villainy with the Shadow King. I think the ball thing is going to end up being something like somebody who's looking for David, but it's going to be somebody who's like on his side. Just kind of went in about an odd way of collecting him. So
it's Cable.
Yeah.
No.
Oh
but
man.
See, who else has Chris Claremont created? Let me see. Oh, let's go with Captain Britain, right? It's probably Captain Britain.
I hope. Yes, bring on Excalibur. I used to love
God, that would
comic.
be so awesome. I would love an Excalibur show.
All right.
Said nobody else
said,
ever.
Yeah.
With that said, I'm going to bring this to a close. All right. Overall, I would give the season an A. As much as it was kind of freaky at times, very surreal, esoteric, I enjoyed it. I'm excited to see what they do for season 2. I couldn't wait to watch the season finale. So those are all marks of a good show. I think we would all agree. Next week on the network, we've got Body Count on the Metal Hammer of Doom. That's going to be Wednesday. Jesse and I will be talking minimalism on Thursday. Sean Garmer is going to be reviewing WrestleMania weekend Tuesday night, and I don't know what's happening on Monday. So that's next week. This past week, Metal Hammer of Doom reviewed Steel Panther. Damn You Hollywood, we reviewed the Power Rangers. And on Monday, source material, we did the second half of our Iron Fist, the Living Weapon series. We've got a couple of wrestling shows from the Wrestling to the Max up on the network, filling in some spots. So give all those a quick listen. Go ahead, Jess. Go ahead and do your plugs.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, go give that Rattleitch Broadcasting Network Facebook page a like to stay up on top of all the great podcasts that we have to offer. As Mark mentioned, I do a comic book podcast on here. Usually, Ronnie Adams helps and co-hosts on there. We also did a bonus episode there this last Monday on Luke Cage, Power Man meeting Iron Fist, which happened in Power Man number 48, if I remember right. So you can check out that bonus content as well. Don't hesitate to give us some feedback. If you like what you hear, you want to hear some more, you want to hear us talk about any type of subjects, let one of us know. You can follow me at Stiznarkey on Twitter. I do have a Twitter for the Source Material podcast. It's at SourceMattCast. Other than that, thanks again, gentlemen. I loved this series. I really did. So I look forward to talking season 2 and figuring out what the hell that sphere was.
All right. You want to plug anything, Ronnie?
We just Screaming Boy podcast, www.screamingboy.com. Find us on any kind of social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And then we just released 2 episodes this week. One we did live here on the Rattleitch Broadcasting Network, where we talked about Kong Skull Island, and then talked about kaiju movies in general. Because, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen Kong Skull Island, they do hint at Godzilla, King Ghidorah, Mothra, and Rodan at the end of it.
Monsterverse.
Yeah, they're bringing back the amazing kaiju, monster movies. And then we just recently did. Jesse and I sat down. We just BS'd a little bit. That led into an Iron Fist discussion and the roller coaster of emotions I went through with the critics bashing it without even seeing it. And then we talked a little bit about. It was just like I said. It was just a potpourri of subjects. Ghost Recon Wildlands that just released on PS4, Xbox, PC, Xbox One, I should say. And then we went into really silly G.I. Joe names, which led to the greatest outro in Screaming Boy history. It was me screaming poop stain. So, if you want to know what that's about.
Best closer ever.
All right, Josh, do you want to read from your train schedule?
I was getting ready to say, I love doing these podcasts with you guys, and I have a lot of fun. But at the end of them, everybody does all their cool plugs for everything, and you really don't have to humor me with doing the same thing for me, because we all know that I'm not hosting my own shows, and I'm not doing all this stuff. So every time I'm always I have this really sad Twitter. So it's really fun. I love talking, and I basically am the resident non-expert that reads a lot of comics, and I'm perfectly happy with that. The one question that I do have, so you're all's Metal Hammer of Doom. Do you all have any plans to do the new Mastodon album, because that was just released on Spotify today, and I am really frustrated that I just found out that it came out today, because otherwise I probably would listen to it like 3 times through by now.
A week after Body Count. Yes, it dropped the same time as Body Count, but Body Count takes precedent on the Rattled Broadcasting Network. So this Wednesday we'll be reviewing Body Count, and then the following Wednesday is Mastodon.
Duly noted.
All right. Priorities. All right, everybody. Thank you for listening. We'll be back again, like I said, next week with a whole new slew of shows. Be well, be safe, and behave.